Well, good afternoon. Hopefully you have all been enjoying the sessions today. Some really great content in each of the presentations. It's always a pleasure to hear from Dr. Gee and Dr. Vivek, get a little practical training like we did from Tim. And then how exciting it is to be in this next chapter right now in innovation with Project Summit. So thanks to all the speakers so far for today. And thank you all for attending this final session, which is a case study on master schedule development and management using NetPoint. So let's go ahead and get started. During our session today, we'll take a look at an active project that we are currently working on, which is in the design phase. We'll talk about some of the challenges and the risks associated with the project itself, as well as what we face to date or are currently facing with this project. And we'll look at how NetPoint has played a key role with respect to the master schedule and how it has had an impact on addressing some of those challenges and risks. So my name is Amanda DavyRomano. I'm a senior director here at PMA based out of our Chicago office. I have 16 years of project management and controls experience, all 16 of those here with PMA. Before I hand things over to my colleague and co-presenter, I'm going to share a little fun fact, well, more like an interesting fact about me. So for as long as I can remember, seeing images or objects that have clusters of like little tiny holes always seem to bother me. It kind of creeps me out, makes my skin crawl. But recently, just a couple of months ago, I learned that I'm actually not alone in this. It's a real thing. It's called trypophobia, which is an aversion or a fear for some people to the sight of clusters of small holes or bumps. I found that quite interesting, and I'm glad to know I'm not alone in this.
That is unique, Amanda. Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Helner. I'm a director of operations based out of our Houston office. I have 13 years of project management experience in multiple different industries. 3.5 of those years have been spent at PMA. Fun fact about me, one of my out of work favorite pastimes is scuba diving. I've been a diver since I was 12 years old. I'm actually a certified master scuba diver instructor, and I spent a few months in Vanuatu and teaching out there in the South Pacific, and now have over 400 hours of time spent under the water. It's a lot of time breathing under the water. So we're going to start off today, the next slide, to start the exploration of NetPoint using this case study. But I first want to give you a brief project overview to get your mind with where the project is. So this is an aviation project for a major airline located at George Bush Intercontinental Airport in Houston, or IAH. The building is a multifunctional building. It has office spaces, warehouses, production areas, all under one roof, which makes it a complex building structure. When completed, the facility will be over 200,000 square feet. The structure type is tilt-up concrete, which is a very typical building method for this region. What makes this project really exciting is that it's a greenfield construction, which is really unusual at most airports nowadays, because most airports are very densely developed with no usable space around them. IAH is in a unique position where there's actually quite a bit of parcels of land available to allow for continued growth and expansion of the terminal and off-terminal facilities. However, being a greenfield project, there are many unique challenges. For example, this location actually has no utilities serving it whatsoever. So we actually need to install nearly 2 miles of water pipeline, 1.5 miles of sanitary lines, as well as all the fiber optic communications, natural gas, electricity. Everything you need to have a building up and running has to be brought to the site, which is a major capital expense and a logistical issues for design. Obviously, all this work has a lot of federal, state, and local jurisdictional, both environmental and building type permitting that all have to be processed in order and closely coordinated to meet our go live date. Any slip on these permits could negatively impact getting this building constructed in time. So I'm actually very fortunate in that I started on this project very early really in the envision phase, when it was just an idea, and was able to take it through the programming phase as well, which really started out in August of 2022. The project is driven by a need to replace an existing aging facility that just doesn't meet the client's aggressive growth demand and really their expectations for what they're going to serve to their customers. The programming phase kicked off with a very extensive analytical analysis of all the client's facilities to help us determine the building size, the overall scope, look at lessons learned from other facilities, and assess all the potential locations. The next step was really right-sizing the facility itself and all of the functions within the building. So we did a really deep dive into the client's flight schedule. So that includes a number of flights, type of aircraft, the number of passengers, where the aircrafts are routing to really determine how big each of the functional areas in this building needed to be. With all this information, the team was able to develop a high-level schedule and budget for reviewing with the client's leadership for the approval to move forward. And that actually got us to our go live dates. I'm actually going to jump down to the bottom of this graphic here because it's really where we started, right? We wanted to start with the end goal in mind. I'll discuss in more details the commitments that led up to the go live date in upcoming slides. I really want to emphasize the importance of starting with that end goal in mind. The forecasted flight schedule and passenger growth is what's driving this. So this building is not constructed in time. The client won't be able to meet its revenue goals. So due to the urgency of this project and all the challenges with the greenfield construction, the client saw a need for a dedicated project management team, of which PMA was selected. Starting off from this project, PMA developed RFP packages, further developed the scope and the project schedule using NetPoint. We brought in NetPoint to really help facilitate and allow the customer to visually see how all this project had to come together to meet their end goal. The design kicked off in 2023. The designer and construction manager at risk were onboarded, and we held a 3-day intensive kickoff meeting. Heading into the meeting, there was really 3 project schedules, an owner, a contractor, and a design schedule. We all know we can't work off of 3 different schedules. So part of the scheduling workshop was to bring these 3 very similar yet different schedules together into one master schedule. And Amanda will talk about how NetPoint was used to accomplish this later on in the presentation. And finally, construction. Really, that's the day we're all aiming for. We love to see, boots on the ground and shovels starting to dig up dirt. So again, due to the very aggressive schedule of this project, it has to be phased with multiple overlapping work packages. So it's vital that all these packages come together in the correct sequence and are executed both in the design and permitting side to meet the end date. Again, this is another place where NetPoint has helped the team align all these complex packages to develop the projects. Next slide, please. So as I just said, there are numerous scheduling challenges and risks that must be managed to deliver this project successfully. Really, the first one is the main driver for this project together, which is why this facility is needed. As mentioned previously, the project is driven by the client's rapid growth and projected passenger travel demand. We've all heard the post-COVID travel boom on the news, or some of us may have experienced that ourselves when we go to airports and have very congested terminal buildings. So the client's trying to capture that growth and meet their customers' demands. There's also an aging facility that is desperately need to be replaced. So it's kind of a very urgent need to get this building up and running, so we can get out of the old building. Additionally, the client's introducing some additional premium services for the passengers, which is requiring the need to add additional functional support into this building to meet those new passenger demands. Next, the committed go live date. Again, we started with the end goal in mind. During the programming phase, when we were reviewing the flight schedule to determine this and looking at the overall construction schedule, I believe we were actually showing this project completing sometime in like Q2, Q3 of 2027. But that didn't align with the client's goals for when they were receiving aircraft and what their expectations were for their passenger count. So we actually found ways to remove 14 months of schedule. And we also had to tie that in to all the regulatory. As mentioned previously, there's a bunch of federal agencies involved with our NEPA processes, and really starting with those permitting processes to beginning, we had to understand how that impacts the schedule to make that end goal. So permitting, as just mentioned, one of the issues we had with permitting is it was hard to find a single point of contact that was able to give us a clear, detailed, step-by-step guide or process for how this greenfield construction project would have to go. So what we did is we brought together a whole bunch of that, I don't know, 5 or 6 different SMEs, including the construction team. We all sat down and used NetPoint to discuss all these permitting processes and how those permitting timelines would drive design and how they would drive construction to come up with an overall permitting schedule. Next slide, please. The next challenge we had was ownership of the master schedule. As mentioned previously, there was 3 schedules: an owner, a contractor, and a design schedule. And again, we all know that we can't build a project based off 3 different schedules, so they all had to be combined in one. The next issue we had with the schedule is that there was multiple hands, both on the client and the designer side, that were behind the scenes making changes to the schedule. So we brought that into the PMA network. So there was a single point person controlling that schedule and then feeding it back to the project team. The other thing we were experiencing is that the owner had different strategies changing based on their leadership goals and the goals for meeting some of their future projections. So to help align those strategies, mostly with funding the project, we had to look at that and have frequent workshops to show here's how we can improve the schedule, or here are the impacts to the schedule if we make that strategy change. And last challenge I want to discuss is the stakeholder management. Airport projects in general have many stakeholders, again, federal, state, local, as well as our own internal stakeholders. A lot of those internal stakeholders are very operational focused folks. And some of them, this is the first time they've ever worked on a project and been involved with design and having say as a stakeholder in how the project's going to look when it's built. So making sure we manage so can speak to all those operational folks. NetPoint has been absolutely critical to be able to show them on a screen, hey, here's the schedule, and it lays it out in really easy ways that they can understand, and we can talk through all their decisions and show how those decisions will impact the project progress. And with that, I'll turn it over to Amanda, who will dive deeper into these each of these topics and show you how NetPoint was actually used to help in all these workshop sessions.
Matt. So our project controls efforts on this project, they really kicked off around June of last year, 2023, with our initial focus being on the master schedule development. The project was in the initial planning and procurement phase, so we were getting on board early in the project. And as Matt mentioned, we also knew that we had a aggressive time frame here to work with. So at that point in time, the master schedule was being developed and maintained in Microsoft Project. It was being updated and manipulated, as Matt said, by multiple hands that had access to the schedule, which, as you can all imagine, that was definitely causing us some challenges and issues. There were a number of placeholders in the schedule. Those were based on assumptions from other similar type projects. There wasn't much detailed yet developed related to the permitting requirements. And the schedule was indicating that the committed turnover date was really going to be a challenge for us to achieve, if it was even going to be achievable at all. So in order for us to truly get a handle on the schedule, we first worked to convert the schedule from Microsoft Project to P6. What that allowed us to do was not only eliminate the multiple hands that were in the schedule, but it also set us up to be able to take and then maintain ownership of the overall master schedule for the remainder of the project. So concurrent to this conversion, we also developed a summary schedule in NetPoint, and that's really what kicked off our initial use of NetPoint on this project. Okay, so what summarizing the master schedule in NetPoint did was it allowed us to really understand the overall time frame and plan for the project and what we were working with. So we were able to identify the key drivers and activities. We were now able to see that plan visually in an easy to follow one-page schedule. We can see here with this summary schedule on the screen that what it pointed out was we had a 6.5-month gap initially between the committed turnover date and the date the master schedule was currently showing. It also pointed out some areas where we needed to dive further into the details and look at the logic, which highlighted where there were some flaws, some incorrect ties in the details of the schedule. So NetPoint was really key here in that initial analysis of the master schedule, which is what we were set to take ownership of at that time. So we had a number of working sessions, and during those sessions, we worked simultaneously with both the detailed schedule that was now in P6 and our summarized schedule that we had in NetPoint. And we continue to analyze the overall schedule, identifying any additional issues, any gaps. We worked through those one by one, correcting the logic as necessary, then also building additional tasks and additional detail where it was needed as well. As a result, we now had a schedule that got us back on track to meet the committed turnover date, and we now had a higher level of confidence than we previously had that we would be able to actually achieve that date. We also now had a nice one-page summary schedule for the overall project that complemented the more detailed schedule we had in P6, and it also became a means of our leadership and stakeholder communication of the schedule. Now, we still had some work to do here at this point. We still needed to coordinate this schedule with the initial designer and contractor schedules, which, as Matt noted, at this point, we're similar, but we still weren't yet aligned. So we'll get into how NetPoint helped us do just that. So in this next section, we're going to take a look at some examples of how we've continued to use NetPoint to date as a tool for us to facilitate discussions and planning sessions to help us further plan and sequence tasks in the schedule, adding more detail as needed. We've done some scenario planning, and we're also using NetPoint to help problem solve and drive decision making. So going into our design kickoff workshop, one of our primary goals was to achieve alignment between those three schedules that Matt had brought up: our owner schedule, our designer schedule, and our contractor schedules. As part of this workshop, we facilitated an interactive planning session using NetPoint, of course, when with the primary focus of being how design, permitting, and construction were all tied together within the time frame for the overall project. So in attendance, we had the key owner, designer, and contractor stakeholders as part of this working session. Smaller group, but really had those key players in attendance for the session. So as a result, we were able to validate the overall design timeframe. We were able to identify and break out a work package plan that made sense for the project and allowed us to meet our committed turnover date. We were able to validate the overall construction timeframe, and we now had an aligned plan that we would continue to expand upon through the progression of design. So NetPoint was really a key factor in the success of this planning session. It truly helped foster the engagement, the interaction, the collaboration, which is what we needed in order to reach that goal of achieving alignment in the overall plan and schedule. So we were able to build a plan in real time. Folks were getting up out of their seats, going up to the screen. So collaboration was happening right there on the spot. And then we were able to share the plan quickly post completion of the workshop, and ultimately then incorporate the plan back into our overall master schedule as well. It's kind of a side note here that this interactive planning session was really so well received that it led to facilitating a similar session for another project that was also kicking off around the same time frame at IAH as well. So as Matt noted earlier, understanding the permitting requirements for this project has really been quite a challenge. So this is another area where NetPoint played a key role. We used NetPoint to help get alignment with what the permitting requirements were, to plan, sequence the tasks associated with getting those permits in hand, and then tie them into the overall schedule to help us better understand when these tasks actually needed to happen in order to keep us on track with our design and construction time frames. So this example here shown, we did some scenario planning with respect to a specific environmental permit that really could have had a big impact on the project if things didn't quite go as we had hoped they would. In the top scenario, this is reflecting what the typical or standard activities and sequencing and durations were for this specific process. And that was putting us at about a mid-October date for receiving this permit. That was about 2 months past when we really needed to have this permit in hand in order to keep on track with our schedule. So now the bottom scenario, that reflects the expedited plan that we developed during a working session, talking through where tasks could be potentially overlapped or durations could be shortened in order to bring us back in line with the time frame that we were trying to achieve. So again, folks being able to see the changes happening in real time during a working session, it sparked that interaction, it sparked that collaboration, and it allowed us to come up with a plan that was agreed upon and then was ultimately incorporated and tied into our overall schedule as well. Another example here of some scenario planning that we did with NetPoint is related to the project funding strategy. As this project has progressed to date, there have been several owner-directed strategy changes when it comes to the funding plan. So NetPoint has been used to be able to respond quickly to these changes, gave us the ability to provide management with schedule scenarios that allow them to see what the downstream effects and impacts of making the changes are, which then helped us contribute to the decision process. So in this example here, we are communicating that how just a 2-week push in the completion of design, 60% design here, would actually end up causing a 5-month shift in the timing for us being able to get our full funding in place. So unless we made other changes to the schedule, we were going to have a significant impact on when our funding was going to be available, which then would have a significant impact on our construction timeframe and our ability to hit that overall end date. So now we were able to make decisions accordingly based on looking at these different scenarios and the best path forward in order to keep us on track with the plan. Additionally, creating these different funding strategies and specific fragnet schedules, that also provided the ability for us to develop and then update and continue to update the cash flow plan for the project as well. So here we've got another schedule fragnet example. This time we're focused specifically on the work package planning, which involves design, permitting, and construction. And as Matt brought up earlier, the work package plan for this project is crucial because of our aggressive schedule. So these work packages needed to be sequenced appropriately in order to be able to get construction started and completed within our planned time frame. Since the initial planning as part of the design kickoff workshop, we've been progressing with five work packages. That's been the plan to date. Design is well underway for all 5 of those work packages, with a couple of them actually nearing completion. And the construction detail, the contractors building out their detailed construction schedule based on these 5 work packages as well. So using these design and construction timeframes that we now had, we were able to hone in a little bit more on, and we also had necessary time for the requirements. So something we needed to plan for was that while we have some overlap in the design and construction portions for the work packages, we would not be able to have that same level of overlap with the permitting packages, as the entity responsible for reviewing the packages reviews them one at a time. So this added another layer to our challenge to make sure that we were able to still meet all those permitting requirements within that time frame with little to no overlap. So this fragment here focuses on just that. It's ensuring that our latest design and work package completion dates and targeted construction start dates can be met. And we also now have a handle on the plan for getting the work permitting in place as well, work package permitting in place as well. So this fragment was developed during the contractor's development of the detailed construction schedule. So we also use this fragment to highlight any differences between our owner schedule or master schedule and then also the contractor schedule. And then we were able to work through those differences as well. We had a few places where we were misaligned, but for the most part, we were pretty aligned. The overall work package plan has also contributed on the financial side, as we've been able to allocate funds based on this plan, which has also been contributing to the overall funding strategy. So to sort of wrap things up here, one of the things that we wanted to do was share some tips based on really our specific experience and success with this project. Tips for getting over what we're calling that kind of initial hump of introducing a new tool to a client or within a project. So initially, you're going to want to put some focus on understanding your audience. Be thoughtful about the who, the when, and the how when it comes to your approach for introducing NetPoint. Are you going to be introducing it to one person during a meeting or a workshop, similar to what we did with our design kickoff workshop, to other schedulers or even non-schedulers? In a meeting or workshop environment, you're likely going to have a mix of folks with differing levels of knowledge when it comes to scheduling. Those that are familiar are going to have a different initial reaction than folks who are not necessarily familiar with scheduling. So really being mindful of who you're presenting to or introducing it to help tailor your approach.
One thing to add to that too, Amanda, I think one of the important things is we found it important to limit that group as well. What we found is when there's a larger group, especially with those operational stakeholders or more senior level, these kind of down in the weeds, looking at the schedule, sometimes isn't of interest to them, or sometimes a little bit too complex, and just maybe not a good use of their time. Also, when there's too many voices in the room, it tends to cause some confusion and may take longer to get to your goal. So we really focused the session. I think we had maybe like 10, 15 people in the room that were like the key people from the design side, the permitting and construction side, to really hone this schedule in very quickly and get in good input.
So then doing some initial prep work can also be very helpful. So if introducing NetPoint as part of a planning session, one of the things that we would recommend is to try not to go into that session with just a blank NetPoint canvas. So one of the things that we did with this project was, in advance of the design kickoff workshop, we sent out a document to obtain some initial schedule related information from the stakeholders. So we gave them some general guidelines on the level of information that we were looking for, which allowed us to pre-populate some information into NetPoint to really get us started as we went into that design kickoff workshop.
Yeah, so one thing we did is really, I guess I'd phrase it as making sure that the people in the room were within that right mindset coming into the scheduling meeting. For context, like I said, this was a 3-day workshop. This was done at on the third day in the afternoon. So we just had 2 days with all the stakeholders, with a very intensive kind of design kickoff, looking at design elements, talking about the programming. So switching out of that mindset of the detailed design and the forward thinking of what this building needs to be to meet the future growth demands, trying to switch gears into, okay, now let's try to sequence this out. It's just a different mindset. So we had to do some work ahead of time to make sure those players in the room were able to kind of switch gears and to think a little bit differently coming into the scheduling session.
And then finally, you want to try to make it as interactive as possible. So with technology today, virtual sessions can and are certainly done. But if in-person is an option and it's possible, we really find that that's the best route to go. It's much easier to read the room. There tends to be much less distractions for folks. So it's really in-person is really the route to go if it is an option. If you are doing it in person, you want to ensure that the room is set up to encourage participation from the attendees. So stage the seating around the screen being used for collaboration and engagement, where you're going to project NetPoint. Making sure you've got other tools in the room as well, a whiteboard or a flip chart just to jotting down action items and things like that. So really have that room set up to be able to encourage that participation. Also, don't be afraid to just build the schedule live. Build as the folks are talking. That there's a lot of power in that when people see what they're saying being translated to a plan right there on the screen. And that's really what sparks a lot of the continuous interaction during sessions like this. Also, try not to put too much focus on the formatting during that process. You can always take some time post-session to do some cleanup and optimization of your NetPoint schedule. So focus on getting the activities, the durations, the relationships in place, and then take a little time afterwards to kind of fine-tune before you send anything out. anything you want to add there, Matt?
So again, we really encouraged the interactive participation in this meeting. So we set that precedence up front coming into the meeting with that. This isn't going to be a sit at your seat and listen to us as we talk about schedule. We told them, get out of your seat, move around this room. I'm used to being from a family that's always surrounded by food, so I brought lots of food in. There was tons of sugary things, tons of things with caffeine to keep people energized and interested in moving forward with the schedule. So always encourage that to people to get out of their seats, move up, touch the screen, whatever's needed to keep that energy alive, to keep moving forward through the work session.
Okay. Well, we'll take this time now. It's been to just kind of thank you all for your time in this session. It's really been a pleasure to be able to share a bit of our experience with this specific project, and hopefully you were able to take something away here today that'll be useful for you and your projects in the future. So we do have some time here and are happy to take any questions that you may have.
Yes, thank you both, Amanda and Matt. I will read the questions from our audience for your response. The first question, how difficult is it to get an owner or project team to do an interactive planning session? Any tips?
Yeah, we just went over a bunch. I think it is a little challenging in the beginning, right? So ahead of this workshop, I actually worked directly, I'm in house with the client every single day. So part of it is engaging with those relationships that we have with the client. So me and the client directors and project manager worked for probably 2 weeks leading up to this workshop, really developing an agenda, a schedule. And during this time, I was showing them little snippets of NetPoint and what we can do and how powerful it could be with where we were at the schedule, and kind of having those disconnects between the 3 different schedules. So through those working sessions with the client, I was able to get that early buy-in. And then I kind of talked to the contractor and the designer as well, and showed them, hey, here's what we intend to do. What do you guys think? And they all bought in on it. Before we even went into the workshop, they said, hey, we think this is a great idea. And then from there, as Amanda mentioned, we sent out kind of a flyer beforehand saying, hey, here's NetPoint, here's what we plan to do, here's some basic information, so we can kind of kick this workshop off on the right foot. And again, really, it's making sure the right people in the room that are going to be engaged in that process, that have decision-making power, and then keeping it energetic, keeping it alive, keep it light. I think in our session we had, we're fortunate that the designer and the contractor both have a good working relationship with each other from some previous projects. So it was a lighthearted effort. Everyone kind of could joke, but still make meaningful progress. So the whole energy in the room was very positive the whole time. It was exciting to see that as we were drawing things out and people's thoughts were coming to life on paper, and how those were interacting with each other, and how we were able to make the schedule work to meet the end goal. It made everyone feel very positive that we're able to collaborate and make the deadline dates that the client was expecting.
Great answer, thank you. The second question reads, how would you apply the experience from this project to a new project? Would you do anything differently?
I could start there initially, Matt. Just from this specifically from the planning session, I'll talk a little on that. So, as I had mentioned, the planning session that we had brought an opportunity to be able to do that again for another project. So, we really focused on taking what worked, all the things that we've talked about here about making it interactive, things like that information, as much information as possible initially so that we can go in prepared. So I think we took a lot from how that interactive planning session went. And we were able to do it again, I think within a month, for another session. So yeah, I think there's always ways to improve and make things better. And I think we learned from that session to be able to make that additional opportunity work for us as well.
Yeah, and from my side, I would say one lesson learned from this was do it earlier. Do it as early in the process as you can. We did this at the kickoff meeting, going into the original design, but in hindsight, I wish we did this in the programming phase as well, because we were looking at multiple different properties that this facility could be built on. Each had their own challenges with them. Each had maybe potentially different complications with environmental permitting. And it was a much smaller group. We had a different engineering firm helping out with some of the analytics, and it was a small group of, from the owner side and myself. So we were developing the schedule in P6 kind of just based on our own thoughts and experiences from some other projects. But I really wish we brought NetPoint in earlier to help visualize and help us kind of workshop some of these earlier items. I think when we first brought NetPoint on at this design kickoff, there was items in this original owner schedule that we found very quickly on NetPoint that where the logic ties just didn't quite make sense for the sequencing, or certain items were overlapping when they shouldn't have been. We're very quickly able to see the critical path, and I think it was a different critical path than we originally thought it would be. I think we originally thought there was one environmental permit that we all thought that, hey, this is the critical path, we need to focus on this. And we put it on the NetPoint, we kind of saw that, it could be that, but depending on how things are shifting around here in the schedule, it really could be this other part of design becoming your critical path. So I really wish we started earlier with NetPoint.
Understood. Thank you. And our last question, that is currently for clarification, are Project Summit and NetPoint the same tool?
Amanda, I'll let you field that one.
They are not. They are not the same tool. Yeah, no, they're not. But I think there's differences, there's strengths, and different use cases for either one. Me personally, I'm really just starting to scratch the surface with Project Summit, and finding opportunities for us to really be able to apply it to our clients and the projects that we're working on. So, I think one of the main differences I see today, just getting into Project Summit here, is Project Summit's going to have the ability to really take much larger schedules and summarize them for us in a quick manner, where with NetPoint, we can import, export to and from other tools such as like Project or P6, but we're kind of doing that summarization in our own way in NetPoint. So I think there's part of the power of what we're going to see with Summit here is being able to do that much quicker and easier. So definitely uses for both of them. It just depends on what you're looking to do at whatever point in time in your project.
Yes, and actually another question ended up coming in as well. What suggestions do you have for shortening or optimizing the schedule?
Yeah, so our first pass at bringing these schedules together, we saw a lot of areas where there was where there was gaps, right? There was gaps in the design or gaps in the construction. So those were the easy things. We were able to shorten those up just because there was a gap there. Why it doesn't need to be there? Let's bring those 2 items in. We also, as Amanda pointed out, in like the permitting phase, our permitting SME showed everything very linear. Do A, then B, then C, then D. But in the conversations, it turned out that, well, while that's ongoing, this document starts, right? So there's overlapping. So we're able to quickly modify that on NetPoint to show how those items overlap and shorten the schedule. We did the same kind of methodology for our work packaging as well, combining the design portion of the work packaging with the permitting and how that impacts construction. We were able to show how those items could be overlapped to help bring the schedule in.
I'll add one piece to that too, Larissa, just from a different side, because the word optimization is something that I had used. So just to make sure we're covering that piece of it too, in case that was part of what the question was about. So when I was referring to optimizing the schedule earlier in the presentation, I was focused on the visual side of it, right? So if you're in a working session, you're probably working through adding activities, creating logic relationship ties pretty quickly, especially depending on how folks are interacting in the session. And so one of the things that I really like to do with my NetPoint schedules is at the end result, I want to produce something that's easy for folks to follow and understand, right? So one of the things on the optimization side is try to minimize the overlapping or where your logic ties are running through other activities, so that things are the flow, the sequence, the relationships are easy to follow. Other things that we can do is some color coding. You saw a lot of that with the examples that we showed today. So highlighting, the specific design activities or the specific construction activities, those all help with that optimization of the schedule when you're producing your final work product.
I also think the overall kind of hammocks help at the top too, where we have I would say in our project, we have kind of 3 big buckets. So, we have the design, we have the permitting, we have the construction, we have, the funding portions, right? They're the big kind of hammocks that you saw at the top of the screen on most of the slides Amanda was presenting. But then under each of those was kind of the 7 or 8 different tasks that fit under that hammock. And what I'm able to do is, present those hammocks to the operations and the senior leadership. They don't necessarily always care about all the details involved with it, but they want to know, well, when does the next phase start? When does it end, right? So being able to just kind of quickly pull off those hammocks is a quick visual for those more senior and operational people that just make it so much easier to see versus on Microsoft Project.
Great. That completes our questions. Thank you both for the presentation on master schedule development and management using NetPoint. If I could get you to click to the final slide. So that brings us to the end of the 2024 NetPoint and GPM conference. Remember, session recordings are available for the next 30 days, and PDU, CEU certificates will be sent out soon. Don't forget to share your feedback via the survey link on the navigation bar. We want to say thank you to all of our speakers, and thank you to our attendees as well. Take care and farewell.